And I the about halfway through the chapter, I got a good laugh because Brave, you mentioned in one of the previous chapters how much you liked like the excerpts and like just the examples and stuff. And this chapter was pretty much all excerpts and examples. It was like pretty much paragraph by paragraph of like, this is what Shuangzi said, this is what Shuangzi said, this is what Shuangzi said.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, pretty good. And my first note that I wrote down, it was at the very beginning of the chapter. And I wrote it down because it's probably my favorite little paradoxical detail about Taoism, which was the awareness without thinking. Because I think that anyone outside of this sort of like ring of discussion, someone who's not really familiar with Taoism, if you were to tell them like, one of the principles, something about it was, this awareness without thinking, this idea of being aware without thinking of it. And, they immediately would come up with like, how would you even go about that? And it's a really cool conversation to have because there are plenty of things that we are aware of and that don't take any sort of investment of thought. And I thought that's always one of my favorite details to discuss because I think it's one of the most calming things about Taoism. And even in that part where it's talking about like, the awareness, without, direct thinking, it kind of takes us back to, it says like, if you go back to chapter 2, the end of the chapter, it kind of sets us up with this sort of frame of mind, before digging into the rest of the book. So it's definitely one of my favorite things. I'm always happy to expand on.
It seems a bit reminiscent of Tao of Pooh, I guess, right? So there it takes the form of being very critical of those who think hard. But here it's just sort of like pointing to the idea that you don't have to think your way out of thoughts, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that just makes it spiral harder.
Yeah. And it's usually about calling to attention like how much judgment is placed on varying levels of judgment is placed on just our general interaction with the world, and that there's a lot of things that don't really have judgment. I mean, the basic examples of these are like, you until you have a thought about it, you don't really think about breathing. And when you do think about breathing, you kind of have a moment where you realize that breathing was taken care of without you really having to worry about it. Just like how your heart beats without you worrying about it. But if you think about your heart beating, sometimes it can like pick up and actually be kind of uncomfortable. Um, your food is digested without really any sort of mental effort. There's just like your entire being is sort of on this just does what it needs to do, and you could really just break it down as far as your knowledge can take you of like how many things are happening in order for you to be and do what you're doing. It's a really interesting topic, especially the more I learn about computers and programming and all that. I mean, there's a lot of great parallels and software and just the computer world and our world. I mean, all of computing, at least normal computing, not quantum computing, but all normal like general software is written in whatever language, but it's based on a binary system. And it's just super interesting to me that we would come up with machines that operate on a binary system, similar to how our more organic machine like being the universe, operates on a binary system of like two energies at work. Just very interesting. I spend a lot of time just like going through all those parallels and like what can be drawn from that.
The math as to why that is also very interesting, because there are they're not anymore, but they're not in development anymore, but there were ternary computers, and there were decimal computers, and there were there were like quaternary computers, and actually the decimal computers were like this weird sort of gerrymandering of like this like it was like a double 5-bit thing. It was weird how they did it, but basically when you do the math, they're actually unary computers as well, just 1 1 1 1 1 1 1, right? But like going from everything is on to now you have an on and an off, right? Because there are analog computers where you can sort of compute basically based off of physical phenomenon, like electrical signals. But since that's stochastic, it's extremely finicky because there's variation that is impossible to predict. Um, um, because our things we're just our technology isn't good enough, so that's why we went into binary. But also because binary is like when you go from 1 bit from unary to binary, the math of computing power shows that is the most significant jump in computing power, and each subsequent digit increase of each bit yields less and less computing power. So then when you have that, it then becomes the most it's like in terms of opportunity cost of computing power, it's the greatest, and then it's the easiest for everyone to build on, right? And I think that is that to echo what you were saying, I think that is paralleled in nature and in the universe. I mean, one of the things that we want to make sure is how much of that is pareidolia, but it does seem to me that there are significant thresholds of things where it's like no, there's clearly some sort of binary or double binary phenomenon happening. Like you got DNA, you got the seasons, right? And it does get more complex with analog information because it's so much more continuous. But I think that like when we really understand, it's that like even our brain systems, there's a system 1 and there's a systems 2, which is basically the formal. It's like a formalized study of the conscious and unconscious brain, right? And there are measurable operational differences between the two, and to see that, even in uh, a personality study, right? And I don't even mean just MBTI. I mean like Big Five too, In the Big Five, there's also very interesting binaries that happen. I know that there's 5, right? But when you look at it, there's like 2 main ones of plasticity and stability, and then the 5 fit in. But then when you look at it, neuroticism is kind of like, like the adopted kid of the one. It's the odd one out. So I don't know. I just shot on adopted kids. I'm sorry, guys, but
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a book
yeah,
called Holographic Universe. You read that book?
I haven't.
Yeah, this is
No.
on my to-do list as well. Apparently, it's a really good book on how universe is holographic. Holographic in the sense that you can take a small chunk of what is, and you can like extrapolate the entire universe with that. You know what I mean? Like a hologram. You can like
Right,
take
Mhm.
the
because
small.
the whole thing is recursive, and
Yeah,
since everything is interconnected, um, in the sense of operating within the system or as a system, but then also having uh, uh, being undergirded by the the recursion. You see everything. You can see you like you need to, in some sense you need to know everything to understand anything, but in some sense you could also say that you only need to know like uh like the most seminal of information to know everything.
yeah,
Right, and then that gets into like more, that is more of a philosophical thing where it's like, I don't know who said it, but you can contemplate the entire universe by looking at a grain of sand. But there's interestingly also uh, very sophisticated and surprisingly similar um, formal uh, fields of computer science and other sciences, but mainly computer science, that deal with that. It's called computational reducibility and irreducibility, and it's very interesting um, to do that or to look into that because basically it they've demonstrated that there are fundamental pockets of computational reducibility, and what that means is that you could do some sort of induction to find some sort of rule to the system, right,
Mhm.
or to whatever, but uh, that the system at the end of the day, whatever it is sufficiently complex, is as a whole computationally irreducible. So the system itself, as a virtue of being chaotic, you have to compute it, and it's like it gets very interesting when you look at how a being that has uh, the ability to that has shit computational ability, but uh, really good, um, uh, let's say, inductive ability, has to navigate a world that is fundamentally computationally irreducible, and how successfully we've done that.
yeah.
Mm.
That's true. Yeah, I'm thinking still about awareness. About how does awareness connect to the last chapter again of the book? Both
How does
aware
awareness
connect to the last
connect to
chapter.
the last chapter?
Yeah, weren't you like leading up to something, or was I?
Um, well, I mean, the last chapter was Wu Wei,
Oh,
and so I mean, Wu Wei is basically it was sort of we talked about that a lot in the last chapter of how sort of what was what was the topic that we kept circling back to on the Wu Wei chapter? It was something like, how do you know when you're flowing? Was that what it was?
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, yeah, something like that. That,
If
yeah,
I may ask, what is Wu Wei?
Wu Wei is a concept in Taoism. It's best, I think, best translated as like it's effortless action.
it's like
Just
synchronicities.
doing, yeah.
So
If anyone
everything
has
just
a better,
happens.
yeah, not forcing. Modern term for it today would be flow state. We talk about like athletes and artists entering a flow state. Um, Taoism would classify that as Wu Wei. And so this chapter being day or virtue or virtuality. I mean, Vito, your question is like, how do they relate? I mean, my immediate thought is
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to how we were talking about, like the highest virtue is not aware of its virtue. Alan Watts's example is how breathing is like one of the highest virtues. Because when you breathe, you don't consider yourself to be virtuous, but breathing supports life and could be considered very virtuous. So in the same way with like Wu Wei, where like our discussion last, I guess it wasn't last week, but it was like, whatever our last discussion was, we were talking about how do you know when you're flowing? Well, kind of you don't, because once you know, you're focused in
Yeah.
on what is flow and what was I doing to get there, and really the answer, you didn't do anything to get there. And so that's kind of like the paradox, is like you can't do anything to flow, you just flow. And once you start worrying about it is when you start flowing a little bit less.
I always thought, yeah, you're saying, Ray?
I was gonna say, I think the way to connect these is that you can think about Wu Wei being applied towards action that benefits others, right? That if you're caught up thinking about, am I helping? Is this good? Am I getting anything out of this? That's like forced virtue, and it's not virtuous. But if you're just flowing with it and doing it for the sake of just the action, then that is like the spontaneous, benevolent nature that I think Tao points to.
I think you can only do that if you don't have any
Yeah.
expectation of how things should go or must go. I feel the moment,
Yeah, exactly.
Yep,
uh, uh,
100%.
and I feel that's where it also connects to the raves mention of Ramdas's exercise of thinking people as trees. Yeah, because it removes a lot of it removes the expect you don't expect anything from a plant. You don't be like, damn, this tree doesn't look as good as it should look. Better put some makeup or something. I don't know. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like you have to respect that. Um, I guess this is how this kind of ties to. Uh, I kind of said it, or I kind of intimated it, but I didn't uh, articulate it at the time. But I guess this is how it relates to uh, uh, computational irreducibility, in a sense that um, basically, like the fact that we live in a fundamentally computational irreducible world, it's like, okay, like us doing what Vito is saying is is to basically assert or to claim to be God, because it's like, no, we reduced the computation, I did it, I know what's best. It's like, no, like you're like one thing that's connected to all of these other things, and the system knows what's best. And if you stop thinking that you know what's best for the system as a unit of the system, then if you like let that go, then you already know how to be the part of the system that you need to be. So when you let that go, I think that is like what like that's how I'm internalizing what way, where it's like uh you let that go, and then since you already know how you need to be, but then you're like confusing yourself, then it just happens.
Mm. Well, Vito mentioned a key word, I think, and you kind of touched on it too, just talking about letting go. I mean, Vito, you mentioned expectation, which I think could be seen as grasping at the future, right? Like clinging to an
And
outcome,
past too,
clinging
right?
to, right, right, like expectations that are supported from past events, right? Like it's happened before, it should happen again. Um,
Right.
and that really does take us out of the present, like just right here, being present. And Rave, that Ram Dass exercise, like just viewing people as trees, um, is very, very good. It's very, for me, I tend, not so much as before, but I tend to be sort of like a lot of my anxiety is just making sure
Yeah.
things are in the right place, making sure that everyone's like safe and happy and blah blah blah. But that's exerting a lot of control because I can't control any of those things.
Yeah. Alan
So
Watts
like viewing,
said, trust the universe. Yeah, trusting to that.
yeah,
And trusting is like letting go of wanting it to be something. And
hmm
Right.
I want to connect this concept with like another concept. You remember how I had
okay,
that crash, pop, 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 whatever. Yeah. I realized the entire the reason for me what's behind that expectation too. It's that I was love. It's like I was in love with the creation more than the creator. All right. So then, because I was in love with this than the person creating it, then the question naturally arises. Who is the creator? Is it my thoughts? Is it my expectations? Is it my emotions? And it's a very tough question to answer. Like, because you're asking, okay, who is the creator? So, right, I'm not meaning like in a religious sense, like very literally. So, someone is creating it. Yeah. You're here. So, who is it?
Well, without awareness, like you don't experience a single thing, right? So, I mean, there's an argument for like you created it to the extent that like, you can only experience what you experience. Um, and also like, I don't know, I've been thinking, you guys have been making me think a lot. And I want to like say stuff, but I know like when my mind's like, oh, I want to chime in and say something, that's when I need to listen more because it's a thought that's appearing. I just wanted to add though, like I listened to Abraham Hicks and
Oh, yeah,
she
me too.
she yeah, she talks about a different word for wu wei, but it's basically wu wei.
Mm,
But it's like it goes back to like there's no one doing it, right? So when that spontaneous awakening to like to a higher consciousness to like you know to be to no longer identifying and transcending your thoughts and being the witness of the phenomena. And it's, I mean, an argument can be made that there's not really a person doing it. It's it's the ceasing of doing. Oh,
oh my God, dude. Wait, wait, wait. Can you repeat your last
doing. It's
sentence?
like you're
Uh,
trying to use a word for doing, but you know what I'm trying to say?
no, can you
Mufflers.
repeat the last
Um,
sentence again? Last
You
couple.
you were cutting
I
out,
I
man.
don't.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
oh
so
the
I
very
have
bit,
I have
the
no
last bit
idea.
just kind of went robotic. I got the majority of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Are you saying that um well, so my initial takeaway from what you were sharing was like when you're in Wu Wei, you like as an ego aren't really there, right? Because you're not really identified in that sense while in that like state of mind or like in because like well once you start to differentiate and start to like um like make judgments and I mean when really once you realize that you're in Wu Wei, you're no longer there. Is that sort of what you were getting at?
Uh, kind of. I guess what I was trying to get at was that it seems like we're trying to do something. How to get into a flow state, how to get into Wu Wei, right?
Yeah.
How to get into alignment, how to get clarity, how to have perfect timing, right? That synchronicity, the perfect timing, and like
Right.
it's life's kind of more magical that way, right? But
Yeah.
then again, it's a natural happening because when you experience anything less than that, it's like automatic. We have natural preference, like using like our emotions tell us everything, what we like, what we don't like. Um, yeah, I mean, it just goes back to like what Abraham says, and like I'm a big devout follower of what Abraham's teachings because for me, it makes sense, and there's no doer. It's just how like how quickly can you realize that you know that this is all kind of it's you just gotta accept this moment for what it is, because even in a moment that's, that we can kind of name bad, it's not really bad, because it's always that circle. It's If the bad is leading to more good, it's leading for us to like develop more better preference for our, you know, it's just our natural evolution, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Something Vito brought up prompted me to think of something a well-known teacher, Joseph Goldstein, once said about, on the subject of like, is this person really all that, or who's, the creation versus the creator, right? And the saying is that there's no desire in a bowl of ice cream. Is that the thing is just what it is, and you are bringing to it all the stuff about like, juicy, I want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I was thinking recently, and I'm gonna connect to this point in a different angle. I was thinking, oh, you know what? No one like gives a fuck about artists, musicians, art. Who's gonna care about it? Because end of the day, what really pays you money is a job. It's like the IT shit, automating stuff, pa pa pa. And I thought, maybe eventually art would die. Maybe soon there would be no art. Yeah. But then today I was like listening to this like a shamisen song, and it moved me, and not because its song was beautiful or something. Something about the guy playing it felt like he was in the flow state. Yeah. Where this I am experiencing this person without any words through his music, you know and I feel like, so they're trying to understand flow state and connecting it to the non you're not the doer thingy. I feel when you're in the flow state, what's happening is you are being yourself by not doing, because when you're trying to doing, you do anything with a certain expectation, right? However, to be in a flow state, you have to not do and just woo way. It's like the way I'm thinking about it is like woo way every microsecond, and it just sings the song that just happens, and you're like not thinking, you're just like
There's actually a
experiencing it.
bit in this chapter.
Really.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's it, and you're just experiencing it. It's like at that point I feel when you're in the flow state, you're not even doing it, you're also experiencing it.
There's in this chapter, I wonder if I can find it, because I didn't write it down, but there
I think I
is
know what you're talking about.
Nina's
It's on page.
Nina's what page is
I
it?
know 120. Are you talking about when you're just talking about music, painting, and all that, and when they're trying to put rules and classifications in the arts, and how by putting all these like sanctions on the arts and sending people to these schools, it produces less geniuses, but when they
Yeah.
just kind of go through and just use, like, they start questioning the rules, that's when creativity comes out.
Yep.
So it's like we've tried to like westernize the art world. Everything we try to like, oh, this is what makes art. Define things that can't really be defined. And in this
Wow.
chapter, they're just talking about how the like real art is when you start questioning those definitions, I guess, and saying, no, this is art.
Well,
And that's when the genius
in
come
that
out.
case, then it is defined. It's just then it's free of anyone's individual manifestation of what they consider art to be or how they would go about art.
Mm-hmm.
So then each individual is free to be as creative as they can be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's not like a military boot camp or whatever,
Oh no.
That's a really you're on the same path I was going with, Nina.
Nina's
There's a lot
amazing
of
that way.
yeah, no, that book club's awesome like that.
Yeah.
There's a bit that's talked about, like, where with geniuses, whether it's like a genius in a certain trade or just a genius on a certain topic, how they really can't describe or teach how they acquired or reached what they did. They just did it, right?
Yeah.
And if if we really truly understood this, like if it was something that was I guess like well studied, we would be able to have a school to just produce all these sorts of geniuses, which would follow exactly what you just said, Nina. Like, we would eventually construct a system full of rules that would sort of strip away some of like what the origin was. And eventually people would end up questioning those rules out of curiosity or whatever it may be, which just would produce even more geniuses. So I guess they accomplish what they're looking to accomplish, but not by the means they thought they would.
Maybe that's why I felt like.
It's
Go on, Asif.
I just meant like the what constitutes a genius is very interesting. Like when you look at when you just look at the psychometric literature. Not that psychology really knows a lot of stuff, but that there are a lot of factors that sort of influence genius. Some that are inherent, like let's say temperamental, but then others that are also that have to do with our experience, and that let's say for example that you can't your creativity can't shine if you lack basic social skills, right? Or if you got stuck being homeless, right? And so I think that it is I feel like we have to like accept the fact that that not really everyone has it in themselves to be a genius. I certainly don't, and that's not because like I'm putting myself down or whatever. I'm putting them down or whatever, right? It's just because like you have to have a certain. Well, not only do you have to have a certain inherent capacity. Let's say you have to have the prerequisite IQ. You have to have a certain temperamental. You have to have a certain temperament. Okay, and then but then you also have to, let's say, have the right experience with which you internalize things, like especially when you're young, right? Or you have to have a temperament that, despite your upbringing, that your creativity shines through anyways, right? Because creativity isn't, some people will say that, oh, you just have a high IQ if you're creative, and it's like they're correlated, but they're not the same thing, right? And so
I would disagree with that because I feel
I
everyone has a different zone of genius, and for
That's
me
how
when
I feel
someone
too.
and for me when I hear someone say, oh, not everyone can be genius, it's almost implying that imagination for them is limited, but that's not true. No matter, there's no human in this world where their imagination is like finite. Oh, I can only imagine this much.
that's
Some
like we have like demonstrated that you can actually you can just straight up measure that, but without getting super technical, you can just kind of it's hard for most people to understand this because it does feel really bad. But if you've ever seen someone that lacks the facilities to read, for example, not even the facilities to string together any sort of meaningful communication, I just mean the ability
Yeah.
to read, like actually decipher the symbols on the page. they're mental. They're not. It's not. It is. It feels really mean to say that they are not experiencing the same reality that we are. But in a way, none of us are experiencing the same reality that we are. It's all a little different, right? But between some individuals, it's maybe more different, and between others, it's maybe more similar than the more different ones, right?
I mean,
So
yeah, I understand what you're saying.
But
Uh, I'm sorry, go on. Nina.
sorry. No,
I'm saying that genius there that genius is more of a smaller thing, and that there's a bigger thing, and that we shouldn't call it genius because we don't want to confuse that. That's my main point before we start selecting that.
well, I think like that there's probably, like you were saying, there's like measures for it, and like yeah, like you can measure somebody's IQ and things like that. But I have some experience working with kids and adults with autism, which kind of like throws all of that out the window, because all of the typical things that you would use as standards to measure things like that can't really be measured in that population in the same way. So I'll have people who can't read, but they can
You mean like autistic savants?
yeah, but also I mean I don't know if like I don't know about the whole savant thing, but I mean I work with kids who are nonverbal, and we place so much value on language. But then I see other talents out of them, and honestly, I'll see like that true like look at the world. Like we're talking with Taoism, like just looking at the world for what it is, and just feeling emotions as they come, and all this kind of thing. And like we're talking about that genius piece and that definition of that, and it's like I think like with what Vito was saying, like that could be, it's all like perspective and can be defined in different ways, and everyone has the potential of like being a genius in their own right, because at the end of the day it's just like something that we came up with, that we said exists, and then it's
well, if we're all
putting people in
individuals,
categories again.
Then we all have at that point it just becomes a definitional matter at that point.
I was going to say, I think an important detail to kind of, I guess, highlight is when we discuss genius, it's often taken that or like measure that genius. We like classify genius by like what we can get the most out of, and in this case, we're not really looking at genius as what produces the most. It's more so of like genius of like just someone has an ability, or they just do something that is beyond their own understanding of how they do it. It just comes to them naturally. And so I guess in terms of genius, it's like, Nina, you've actually talked about this, how some of the the individuals that you work with handle things just so much better than other people, like the way that they can get things out and then it's gone, right? Like, and it's in a very woo way style of things. Like they may be like overstimulated, or they may like have like a hard experience, but like once it's gone, and there's no more hanging on to like what's happened. Like they're just flowing away from that experience. So I think that's sort of like the genius. Well, at least for me, when I'm speaking of genius in this realm of discussion, what I'm really getting at. Whereas I think genius could also be classified as like who has like this deeper insight that's going to provide I guess more
at that
progress
point,
in one way.
Yeah, it's funny how language is like that with those different meanings.
I was going to say something very similar, Boots. Sort of chart out two different threads here. I think one is our definition of genius and what it means, right? And really, like, it's a byproduct of statistical variability. If you want to get really precise, right? So genius, you can take that to mean really good at something. So if you get specific at what that something is, and then you just look at outliers who are really good at it. You know, this is the idea, like, if we understood it and could train everyone to be geniuses, they wouldn't be geniuses, they would just be average students, because that would
Yep.
become the new standard. And so the person who would be exceptionally beyond all of those geniuses would be the new genius. You know, it's just like a moving way in which we define it. But that being said, I think there is something phenomenologically real that we just like sit back and marvel at people who do these things which they can't understand, we can't understand.
Like I've seen a guy, like a one-man band, where they're like hitting a kick drum and playing a cymbal, like they're doing all these things at once, and I'm like, there's no way I'd be able to do that. Like, you know, it's just
Yeah.
things like that, right? Like people, and
Yeah.
just as you said, Ray, like there's so many ways we could take this.
The
Yeah.
most illustrative story for me is like when people describe, I think it was Mozart, he would just be like chilling, doing nothing, and then all of a sudden go into a frenzy and start scribbling down on a piece of paper a symphony, and then people would say, like, as if he was reaching up into the heavens and just bringing it down. You know, like that type of connection. And that goes back to like this idea that thoughts just come out of nowhere. So for some people, the thoughts that come out of nowhere are just these things that are beyond our normal comprehension. And so they're just grabbing them, putting them down in a way that we can recognize. And then I think something about our experience looks out at that and just like marvels at like the truth of what's, you know, being experienced there.
Yeah, there's it's very interesting to look at the creative process, and it was Mozart is an extremely fascinating example, because like the pieces that he wrote were basically shit until he was like 21, but like after he got about like 10,000 hours, you know, that's the adage, right? 10,000 hours to become a master, right? Once he had that experience, then his brain like started like consolidating the information in a certain way, and then he started like if you want to get poetic about it, like he started like living and breathing the music. But to the outside, it seems impossible. Like I could never do that, right? And it's like, well, maybe not. You know, maybe you could do that somewhere else, right? But that's if you have that, you know, an innate capacity, right? The only thing that's separating him and us, let's assume we all have that innate capacity. The only thing that's separating it is that he's closer as a virtue of experience, right? And then that he obviously also has his own unique way of how he's gotten close to that marvel, and also what that marvel means to him, right? Because it is also an individual process. But we also, when we get sufficiently good at something, other people will feel the same way about that with others. And I think that is that what D-Rave said is that's kind of what D-Rave was saying, was that it's about like an outlier, like it's about outliers, you know. But in terms of that, I just mean to say that the experience, like, it really changes like how we think. And then it's like it almost like we do specialize in that sense, and then it feels like from the outside that we're making this massive leap, like that would have been impossible. But it was just at that point for Mozart, after he was 21, after he had a decade of experience, because he started when he was like 8 or whatever, making masterpieces was just the logical conclusion, right? It was just the next step for him. And then he just kept going and going and going. And now we know him as Wolfgang Mozart, fucking boss ass bitch, you know.
Yeah. No, I do understand. I think the way I view the world, I understand. I agree with like Booth's definition of genius. But if you like take it, if you make everyone so unique that the statistic just becomes one person, yeah, then in my head it's like everyone is but it makes sense. Conventionally, the word genius you kind of loses sense because the word genius depends on there being like so many people and you're taking like a statistical average. You're plotting out like a statistic and seeing who's in the high end of the bell curve. Yeah,
Right,
but
like
yeah,
sigma or whatever.
but I feel that everyone is so unique that I feel like there wouldn't be a curve because there'd be just one person in the each graph, and then everyone in their own right is like almost like a unique snowflake, yeah,
Mhm.
That
expressing
that would
themselves
be
differently.
that would be like that would be like perfect, where it's like everyone has access. It's like we could all know, like, okay, so like I feel like we all know that, like for example, like if we've ever been around babies, like we know that like some babies are just different to other babies. Like there's just like some are more extroverted, some are more like rambunctious, some are more quiet, some like playing with things but then not so much with the other kids, and vice versa, like they'll bring out all the pots and the pans, or they'll play with the cars but not with the dolls, or vice versa, and there's things that correlates with, gender, age, whatever, who cares. But I feel like when we partly when we understand the salient dimensions along which we vary, so that we can uh, appeal to the individuality in a way that is constructive. But also, and I think that this is more important, and this is actually the first step that has to happen, when we stop assuming that certain ways are better than others, which is perpetuated partially economically, partially culturally, but I think mostly by teachers and parents themselves, partly as a byproduct of living vicariously. That's more on the parents' side, and then also partly as a byproduct of um, having their own individual temperament and seeing any deviation from what they assume or what they uh, desire the norm to be as not that's not uh, that's not conducive towards uh, creating or cultivating the individual or the individuality of each student. And while that's difficult, I think that when if we understand that that we do vary, and that the variance is okay because it exists, then then what however we need to tailor the individual experience to the individual, that will just come because the prejudice is gone.
I think that's a very Taoist message. I think
Oh, is it?
Shaolin
Okay.
Watts, yeah, Shaolin Watts points to if people stop trying to be other than they are, a lot of our problems would go away. People would align into it.
The
But
thing is, Rave, you know what it is? It's like the society, right? Or every system that you live in, as it's been constructed, just doesn't support that. It gives you the illusion of supporting it, but it just doesn't. It's so hard. It's like you're flowing in an upstream direction because the entire society is trying to like sell you on this idea of, oh yeah, your self-worth is like on the circumstances that you're in and on the creations that you're in. Oh, you get this good watch, get more money, get good food. It's true, and that helps you in the survival, and it kind of tries to um, per, perpetuate that illusion, because
Yeah.
what you're saying is, let's say people say, you know what, I have enough, yeah, so you're kind of like killing off like their need for survival, which is what the entire society is running on. That's why this kind of mindset is so destructive for the society, because the fuel that society is running on is the fact that people need survival, and they think they need survival on stuff that is outside them, you know
Mhm.
and that's not true, like if you like the objectively is not true, but then that kills like entire like momentum of the society itself till it like reconstructs into a like a new kind of society, a new style of society, yeah. But yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
feel like society it kind of like tries to put you in your place. Unless you're like
We've
Alan
hit on
Watts
this.
and Terence McKenna, where you're like just too charming and everyone just loves you.
Mhm. We've hit on this before, that our culture and our economy really relies on cultivating this deprivation model in the individual. That,
Yeah.
your
Yes.
employer says, I have happiness over here, and if you work hard enough, I'll give you some breadcrumbs of it. And then eventually you'll retire, and then you'll be happy if you work hard enough. Um, and so, yeah, I think I agree that the fear is that from the, from a control perspective, is that if people switch to an abundance model, the people in control would lose their control. And I don't know, maybe people have a fear of the uncertainty. Maybe everything, people think everything would go to shit. But yeah, the Taoist idea is that people would just follow their passion, produce value, and then we would just exchange the value that's there, and everything would work out, I guess.
Because
Yeah, but then you wouldn't have all the factory drones.
the thing is, even the survival thing, even the need for survival is just that the deprivation model. Oh, you don't have what you need to survive yet, but once you do, you'll find peace. Yeah. That's like the underlying implication, right? So once you get your needs of survival met, then you can like relax, go to Hawaii and chill, you know, retire, stuff like this. How
That's funny because like each day you have enough. Like it's like, do you go off a minute? Do you go off like a day? Do you go off a year? Like how much, like how much is enough, that you need? Do we have to like, oh, like, I'm not gonna be satisfied until I have like, like 2 years of living expenses like in my bank account, so I don't have to do anything. But like if you live in the moment, like you're provided, you're good now. Even if you're hungry now, like you see the hunger and like food's coming.
Well, it's very interesting, like when that you mentioned hunger, because um, the whole like people in the West, just also first world countries, but it's mostly people in the West. We're so privileged in the sense that most of us, and I mean like the vast majority of us, have never really experienced like true hunger. And that's kind of echoed in the sense that when you talk about with the whole discussion on like intermittent fasting, oh my god, you're gonna fast for 16 hours, how are you gonna do that? It's like, what? It's like the body was designed to fast for several days to up to a week easy. Like but we're so privileged that the instant we get a hunger craving, we're like, okay, now I have time to go eat more cake. And I feel like because of that, because we are being strategically moved away from the environment that's most conducive towards being at one with ourselves, right? We are more and more disintegrated, right? We don't have an inherent purpose. Community is essentially non-existent, right? Yet you have to go online to find it, and even then, it's not like it would have been in person, right? I can only hear you guys. I can't see you. I can't touch you. We can't go out for drinks later. Not that I like alcohol, but you get my point, right? It's a lower fidelity experience, and you and then because it's something like 67%, no, or 77% of people are essentially living paycheck to paycheck, at least in America. I don't know. It would probably be worse in London or the UK in general, I mean. But most of the UK is London, let's be real. It's mostly London. But anyways, because of that, then it's really easy for the culture to just perpetuate that idea of that condition. Get what people really know as $70,000 a year, and then you'll be happy. And it's like you do get more happy as you get more money, But after that point, then you get really confused because that's what you've been told your whole life. And like I feel like a good example is what's that actor's name? He was like really funny. He did The Mask.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey, right? Yeah, Jim Carrey, perfect example of that, guys. He's like, he got all the riches, he got all the fucking bitches. Oh, that rhymed. I should be a rapper. I mean, you get my point. Like, he got everything that he thought he wanted, and then now he's like old, and he's like, yeah, man, that doesn't really matter, It's just
He
like,
definitely
yeah,
had
that
a
helps.
experience, I think.
Yeah. What are you saying?
I definitely think Jim Carrey had some sort of experience. I mean, I think I don't know everything about him, but I think he had some tough life hit him, and it kind of made him just evaluate things differently. And I
Yeah.
mean, some of the stuff he talks
Even
about
he took
is,
the spiritual path, right? It's crazy.
I
Yeah,
mean,
pretty much.
yeah, a lot of what he talks about, I think, resonates with things that we touch on.
I feel like if you the pursuit of happiness is the beginning of the spiritual path. Because I feel like the main answer that spirituality, or the main question that spirituality uh, answers or attempts to answer or has answered is how to live a good life, basically.
Yeah.
And it's not really that complicated, but it's like it's just it to us it's really hard because
Yeah.
because we don't. It's like, I feel like when we were like our ancestors were closer to that, and perhaps more of our ancestors were even there, just content than we are. And I feel like part of that is because the world is constantly superficially changing, that we don't realize that that's all irrelevant. But we get so hooked on the dopamine and stuff about I need
I
to
want
get the
to,
next TikTok
yeah,
video, or I need to post on Instagram and get the likes.
I want to connect this to like a previous concept of ours. Yeah. And
Okay.
because there's like I feel there's still a trap here where it's like the trap of you feeling like you are the doer, oh, I am doing this and stuff like that, which I feel everything else is predicated upon. Like almost it's like a consequence of, where I am doing something, I am doing this, so I am making but then there's like a different, more truer perspective where like Mark mentioned, which is you're not the doer, you're someone being aware of doing. Yeah. And mm, it feels different. The perspective for me feels more profound because there is, for you to like experience that perspective, you should not have an expectation, because anytime you're expecting, you're being the doer. Yeah. The moment you're being someone who's
Yeah.
not the doer, then
I
all
I, I
Right.
this
think
thing kind of becomes false by itself.
right. Yeah. I think
Um,
that that's a really underappreciated point.
yeah.
Mm,
So I was going to flag that. I thought your point earlier was really interesting about the role that privilege plays in creating this sort of external disintegration in our communities and stuff. I've often sort of reflected on the mirror of that and how it leads to internal disintegration, and
Mm,
that like
right.
privilege really acts as a mechanism to buffer you from that which you'd rather not deal with. Um,
Exactly.
and it can work up to a point until you start getting old or until you start getting sick, because no amount of privilege is going to stop those things.
yeah.
Right.
And so there's a way in which opening up to that which we'd rather not deal with is a way of being more whole internally.
Right.
And then
Right.
if you build those skills to be able to be still and steady as these waves of joy and grief pass through, is where contentment can be found, and we're often just trying to push that away.
Right. Because, it's like, like people talk about white privilege, I'm not white, and I don't really think white privilege exists. That's a really unnuanced opinion that doesn't really, uh, I mean, that's kind of black privilege, honestly, saying that someone has white privilege. But, and I'm brown. I'm like very brown. I almost look like a South Indian. So I get to say that. I got him. But no, just trust me,
That's your
guys.
brown
Just trust me.
privilege, yeah.
But yeah, yeah, brown privilege. But oh fuck, sorry,
You're right.
sorry. I'm a bit under the weather. Sorry.
Guys, dying to like make his point.
Yeah,
Go for it.
sorry. I'm just a bit under the weather. That's all. But I feel like what you're saying about disintegration. I feel like with the privilege, and so to use the most common iteration of privilege, which is white privilege as an example, is, and this is kind of contentious, so if you disagree with me, just absolutely ignore what I'm saying. But like the whole concept of white privilege, I feel like, is a very good excuse to then like not integrate, or to even just completely look away from, which begets disintegration of the different outcomes by race, certainly in the U.S. Right, and it's like, there are reasons for that, and part of that is racism, but you do see some echoes of disintegration inside the whole idea of white privilege, specifically as it's construed by the black community, right? Because it's not Asian privilege, even though they make the most money, and they're actually at the top, and whatever. And it's not black married privilege, because married black couples make more money than, on average, all white couples, or all white people, but married couples obviously make more. It's not even Jew privilege, because they have the highest average IQ, or Ashkenazi Jew privilege, right? It's a white privilege. Why, it's like that.
Okay.
So it's not even fundamentally attendant to what is actually currently going on, right? But it's not completely an incorrect idea, right? But it's blame, fundamentally. And when you look at sort of how they use that idea, and then how they talk about other things, for example, and this is not all blacks. I'm not like saying black or bad or whatever. I'm just saying that there are cultural differences at play here that I feel like are perpetuating racial tensions, and that are being exploited by political perpetrators. For example, certain officials of the Democratic Party that are extremely left like to thrive on racial tension. Whereas people who are less crazy, I'm just going to be blunt, people who are less crazy, like Andrew Yang or Tulsi Gabbard, whether I agreed with their ideas or their policy decisions or not, they were not preying on the racial tensions of people, causing further disintegration to just get another term in, So, so you can see this, the precipitates of this disintegration when you see like black people calling each other nigga, but then insisting that no one else calls them that. And it's like, wait, so you want to be different, but you don't. So it's like, you kind of see that culture everywhere, right?
I
And
want
for
to take
example, like when people like rap music, because rap music is really catchy,
Yeah.
I think we've kind of segued a few streams from
Yeah. You know,
our our
yeah.
our discussion.
I wa-
Not that this isn't like interesting. It's just we've kind
This
of
is certainly
diverted.
not Wu Wei. Okay, I get you.
Well, no, actually, it is in a
It,
way.
it is.
That's
That's what I
kind
was
of like
gonna connect it
where
to.
my laughing comes from. Is it is Wu Wei in a sense, right? Because we kind of just naturally fell into these like how all these things could just be connected and related in a way, right? Like we
Yeah.
started with the topic, and then it just became more relevant and relevant and modern. Um, so it's not to say that it's like wrong in a sense, just being in the spirit of, I guess, I don't one thing with book club, like with our book club, I find is I enjoy a lot too is we start with a chapter and we talk about truly anything that comes to mind.
Yeah.
um
Basically.
I mean that's definitely been the nature. Um, the only reason I interject really is just because we are close to the time when we usually close out, and I wanted to make sure. I mean, I wanted to make sure everyone got through their notes that they had written
Yeah.
down or anything that they wanted to share. But also, I wanted to insert a reminder that this is the last chapter and that we will be reading a new book soon. I don't know if it'll be
Yes.
next week because we have to give people to have time to get the new book. But if anyone has a recommendation or something on their mind that they want to continue to explore, just post that or share it with me or somebody so we can generate a poll.
Yeah. Do you guys
Um,
prefer audiobook or physical books? Let's
Either
start with
one.
either one. What about you, Ray?
Never done an audio, and I've always preferred physical. I don't know that I'm ready to try something new.
Okay. What about you, Mark?
I do audiobooks a lot, so I'm
Okay.
open to both.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
also available in print. I always assumed they're just both.
Yeah, they're always both. I just wanted to know everyone's preference. What about you, Nina?
Oh, I don't mind. I'll do
Uh,
either. I did
I
want to say that that last little chapter in the book, which is like
mm,
that once again a new beginning, is actually pretty good. I thought. I read the last little piece. I thought it was
The
just
part
like,
with the collaborator where he's like his final notes.
yeah, I did like it. I don't know if anyone else read it, but
I haven't read it yet. I definitely will. It's good to know that you liked it
yeah,
though.
I think it's worth it to read. So that means anything.
yeah, of course it does. Uh, uh, but that is interesting though. Okay.
Hey, y'all, I gotta head out.
All right.
Peace
See
and
you.
love. Enjoy your weekend.
Okay.
Hey,
All right.
Mark.
Bye, Mark.
Yeah.
Man.
Here you go. I'm
All right. Yeah. Sorry for just going on a fucking train, but yeah,
No
that's
problem.
bad.
All right.
Such an asshole.
Oh, um. Well, anything else, guys? I mean, before we finish up.
We can
Mm,
explore poems, and rather than what I feel sad about, Rave ends the thing with a poem, yeah, and then we have like thoughts, but we have to like, end it, which is like saying it like 12 o'clock. Yeah. So like let's Rave this time you end it with a poem, yeah, and we'll like try talking about it a little bit. If something does come up if someone resonates in some way, and then we'll end it that way, and let's see how it goes. Is that fine for all of you, or
What about the poems again?
like I want to like talk about the poem, what is beautiful, what I liked about it, stuff like that. After he says it, but usually he says the poem and we all have to like leave. So what if like Rave says the ending poem now and we have like couple of minutes to like talk about it and then we can leave. Adios.
Gotcha. Rave, do you have a poem ready?
You have a poem.
I was up.
You didn't come prepared? What the heck?
And
I just
freestyle it. Freestyle it.
move it this Rave, yeah.
I'll go with what I struggling to work my Instagram. How do you find previous stories? Uh, there's well, talk about something for 2 minutes. I definitely have.
There's some really good excerpts from the book, I think, even if you just went back through there.
I don't.
True.
There was one part I really liked.
Take it away, Nina.
Boy.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Well, I'm just gonna say the one part that I really liked. Let me just give a little context. It's pronounced day, right?
Yeah, day. It's like a TD combination, and it sounds like
Oh.
day. It's like day or something like that. The
Day.
official pronunciation.
So it's not that profound, but I really did like it. So it says at root, then the idea of day is power exercised without the use of force and without undue interference with the order of surrounding circumstances. And then it had this little excerpt and it says entering the forest without moving the grass and entering the water without raising a ripple. And that just really kind of drove the point home for me of like just going with nature, you know? Like moving with the grass as the grass moves, moving with the water as the water moves, and not creating the disturbance almost. So it really just kind of drove everything home for me and stuck out, and that's why I liked it. So that's my piece.
I think that's a very eloquent way of putting it. And it's like, I feel like people want to overcomplicate it, but it's like, it's right there. I was like one sentence.
Uh-huh.
No. And
that's kind of what did it for me, was that it was like so simple.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I came late. I didn't know when book club was coming. And Vito was just like, "Hey, jump on." I just woke up because I'm sick, so I woke up late. So sorry I didn't read the book, but that is that I'm gonna read the book because that was this discussion was very nice, and that excerpt was just perfectly put.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad that you joined us today, and please continue to. I mean, feel better, of course, but continue. But we have group every Saturday at 10 Eastern, and then this was our last meeting for this book, but we'll be voting in the vote channel. Yep, chapter at a time. Usually we vote over a book. This was the book for this time. There's already a couple that have been recommended. Vito, make sure you share the one that, just to make sure I have the right one. Make sure you share that in the channel. Search for Meaning was voted on, so that'll be included in case people want to read that. I'm digging through like Carl Jung books to see if there's one that sticks out.
There's one that Alan
and then
Watts
we'll always
loves.
have an Alan Watts option.
There's the Carl Jung book that Alan Watts loves is the one that Memories of the Dreams or something like that by Carl Jung, and Alan Watts is like, it's a beautiful book, guys must read it. Yeah,
Okay.
I tried reading
What's
it and I'm like, man, it's like Carl Jung autobiography, dude. Tells about his stuff and his Freud and he met. It's okay. It's not bad.
Memories?
You got out, dude. What?
Is it Memories, Dreams, Reflections?
Yes, that.
Okay.
That's the one Alan Watts likes. I remember him saying in one of his speeches. Yeah.
Well, all right, guys.
right.
Great discussion as always. Have a great weekend.
Yep.
And I'll see you guys. If we don't have a book that I don't think we'll be able to vote on a book and decide by next week. So what I might do is make a poll, if I can remember it tomorrow. Like make a poll to where we discuss an audio lecture or something of some sort.
Perfect.
I think that'd be a good supplement if we're all still wanting to meet, unless we want a week off. But I guess we had a week off last week, so always up to you guys. Whatever you want to do.
Cool.
Damn.
I'd like to
We
do
have
that.
the ultimate power.
Cool.
I'm just kidding.
I'll put if you have anything on your mind or one that like you've liked and you want to cover,
Yeah.
like please share that, and I'll see if I can find a few that we can vote on, and try to post it kind of early because you might I don't know if
Yeah.
like you'll want to
post it
listen to it
now.
before you
Yeah.
decide or what. So
Do you guys? So you mentioned audio whatever lectures.